Hey, it's John.
And it's Dennis.
How's everyone today? Today, we're going to be talking about renting versus owning real estate. So, Dennis, before I jump straight into this, if you had the option, would you rather rent a place to live in or would you own it?
I would definitely say I want to own it, particularly because, for one, right now I still live with my parents because, if I want to go into my own space, I want to be in a place where I can actually call like second home, where something I own a piece of land wise, and as well as, I just don't want to be in debt, right? And there's also an opportunity for me to rent out to other people to make some passive income. How about you?
Okay, nice. I honestly, it really depends on kind of the situation you're in. I kind of look at just the cost of entry.
Mm-hmm.
Owning is going to cost you more straight up versus renting. You can move in, move out anytime. So I think, you know, you kind of have to, I would look at two factors. Right now, I think I can only afford to rent if I do want to move out. But if I wanted to own, you know, got to make more money, got to, get into the real estate market. And, just over the past 2 years, isn't it red hot right now? I think it cooled a little bit, but cooling just means maybe going down a few percentage. It's probably still, you know, getting pumped and getting higher and higher. And, for those who are trying to own, it might be looking further and further away, if our income don't catch up.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think to own, it's very hard nowadays to be, one person doing a job or a business and then able to, afford that down payment, which is your biggest uh, barrier to enter, like owning your own uh, condo, apartment, house, or whatever kind of shape and form the living situation is. And then your mortgage too, right? Depending on what the bank is willing to lend you for rate wise, it could be even higher than regular rent, right? However, I think ultimately it really comes to a person's background. Like, is it what's the reason to move out, right? Like, John, can you think of any kind of like personal reasons why one would maybe choose to rent?
Yeah, no, for sure. And, everyone's personal situation is different. So some might have to move out because, maybe there's issues, at home, you know, maybe it's space, maybe it's where you work. So there are many reasons why you might have to rent. This topic today, I'm not saying which one is better than the other. There's pros and cons for both.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch base on kind of what are some advantages of renting and what are some disadvantage and vice versa for owning, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I think of renting, I feel that, one, you have a lot more options. No options as in, what you can kind of do with the spare money you might save from versus owning, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, you got down payment, you got your mortgage payment. You might have a bigger upfront cost that, would set you back if you only have like X amount of savings. So, kind of jumping in, one few pros I can see renting. First, I said options of, the flexibility. Number two, if you're renting, I believe, if you're in a condominium or maybe even a housing, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not 100%, but you're not paying some of these maintenance fees, or you might be protected a little bit from the fluctuations in the market because you would go into an agreement with a landlord, and if the market goes down or goes up, you're pretty much paying a fixed rate for the term of your contract, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there are some pros to it, but likewise there are some cons. You're just paying someone else's mortgage. You're not owning your own piece of property. And I think, Dennis, that's what something that you mentioned. You prefer to own something than not own it. So yeah, that's my side on renting. Maybe, Dennis, what are your views of the pros and cons for actually owning, or if there's only just pros?
you know, Before the owning piece, John, I think I want to touch base one more positive is, I think overall it's a mental health positive, right? Just to be, in your own bubble. You can have the freedom to do kind of what you want and that. And to a lot of people, this is it's a turning point, right? Like, you have some more responsibilities. You're able to decorate it the way your space wants and all that, right? I think ultimately it's to create a environment that is healthy for both you and like mentally and physically. I think that would be like the biggest pro on it. But again, this really comes down to, I know, the better for the negative, like, not negative, but like you have to think of it this way: how much you make and does it make sense, right? Like if you're able to afford the rent and not able to feed yourself, are you really affording it, right? Uh, and again, like John said, you're paying someone else's mortgage, so it kind of puts you back into, like, against the wall, or like how much savings can you really do to like own a place, right? It may just delay that effect. So that's where like the owning is a positive, right? So, like, yeah, it may take you longer. You may be, if your situation is not that bad, living at home, or you don't have enough people to help support you in that next step, like ultimately owning a place can give, does all that and more, right? It's you're able to maybe in the future sell it and own a better property, right? The whole passiveness on just having extra income coming into your pockets with, after the mortgage and your maintenance fees and all that, it's great. And some people kind of treat it as their main income, right? If you are very successful in renting out places and all that, then you can have a second property and it just kind of grows in, right? I think those are what I would say are the positives of owning.
Okay, nice, nice. Let's touch on a topic about, if you are renting,
Mm-hmm.
what my impression is, you might be paying a little bit less than, owning a place because you might have to pay, more monthly payments to sustain that mortgage. Have you ever kind of, I've seen articles, I've kind of did a little bit of research on it. This is only effective if you do kind of follow it, not just spend your excess money on, I guess, wants, but putting that excess money into, something that will generate income for you, like the stock market,
Mm-hmm.
investing your money. Can that, return, if you're disciplined, actually outweigh the, you know, I guess the, appreciation of the, owning the property? I think that's something that's, quite interesting when I brought up this topic, the idea of just having that extra money for investment purposes.
Right. So ultimately, like I mentioned, like it really depends on where you want to rent, right? Yes, if you're not living in downtown core where there's a lot of amenities and convenience of to get your daily things, like groceries, shopping, and all that. Sorry about that. Oh, there's a little bit of a pause on my recording. Going back, sorry. So I lost my train of thought for a second. Um, yeah, so if you're living in want to rent in a place where there's a lot of those kind of conveniences, then your rent is going to be very high, right? You may not be able to invest that extra stuff, even if you're, penny pinching wherever you can, right? To accumulate enough to make those returns on investments from like, stocks and things like that come to fruition, right? You're also kind of putting not all your eggs in one basket, but there's no guarantee of the return on that, right? Especially if some people who are not well educated in that field. But if you were to rent somewhere further away from downtown, where the rent is maybe like a quarter of your monthly paycheck, then yes, I think it's gonna be super cheap for you to rent, and you have 75% left for your paycheck to do, investing and putting into other extracurriculars or businesses that would generate you monetary gains, right? And it would be a lot cheaper than owning a piece. of land or buying a condo. It really dictates on where you want to live, right?
Yeah. So why don't we do a little exercise here, maybe a deep dive, just
Mm-hmm.
because, I can't say for certain all our audience are going to be in Toronto.
Yep.
Let's kind of look at some of these renting prices and maybe some of these housing prices up here in Toronto, and wherever you're from, you can kind of get a kind of peace of mind, what you're looking at, because you're living in a different area, your income might be different, everything like that's different. So I think it's really worthwhile that maybe we can try to put some context to our audience and show them, hey, how much is actually the rent in Toronto. Toronto's probably one of those top 10 expensive places, and it's probably slowly creeping up the ladder, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So pretty much just Googled how much are rents in Toronto. It looks like in 2021, the average market rent price is for a let's just say one bedroom apartment, $1,431.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and versus you know I don't know where you're from. Maybe you can kind of do a quick research on kind of what the price is, and you can kind of get some context on how expensive it's actually to rent. But on the opposite end, if I search up how much is it to buy a place, we can kind of see the difference, and then you know you can kind of make a analysis for yourself. If you do have to move out for some reason, then here are some options, and it sounds kind of pessimistic, but you're kind of at the mercy because of how the demand is in Toronto. I believe there's still a supply and demand, and there's more demand than supply, more demand than supply, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think to all our listeners, like even renting fee itself is one thing, right? What your pay is, it it takes a lot from your paycheck monthly, right? Unless you're making maybe in the 3-digit salary category, right? You have to kind of also remember your hydro bills, which is to you don't know, hydro is what we call the electricity bill, because our electricity comes from Niagara Falls, which is using water turbines, right? That's what we call hydro. So you have to think of electricity. You have to think about your internet, your cell phone, which are these are necessities. What if you own a car? Some of these rentals may monthly rent does not include a parking space, so that's additional fees and all. Like then you have your insurance. In Ontario, it's mandatory for all cars to have that, and those comes with its own expenses as well, right? So what I'm saying is there's a lot of things that rack up, but then you also have to consider the fact that it's time, right? If your work is situated downtown as well, then you have the convenience of saving that effort, right? Versus if you're renting far away and then you have to make that commute, that's that's your opportunity cost. So those are the kind of things that you have to consider when you want to rent. Owning is not too different too, but you just have to when you own a place too, you always have to assess the community, right? Like, does it depreciate your value and things like that? Um, you know, is it as an investment opportunity? Is it for you to live in? Those are a lot of factors that you have to count when making the right decision on which one.
Yeah. But obviously, this is a very hot topic just because, you know, it really is does base down to kind of in the individual situations.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sounds really rough, but I think you got to kind of look at the light at the end of the tunnel, or the grass is green on the other side. If you do get to a point where you can own, I think just that appreciation itself, and if you're lucky enough to be able to rent out that place too, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make money, and you know at least get your tenants to start paying your mortgage for you, right? So you eventually own that piece of equity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, while as we're talking about this, I was thinking about that Millennial Monopoly. Have you heard of that, John?
And then is it about like 33% of millennials own more than one real estate, or that's something else?
Something. Okay, that's something else.
Okay,
so
my bad.
that's funny. So Millennial Monopoly, the board game.
Yeah.
So in the original Monopoly, you're buying land, right, and then you put houses and then hotels to generate income, right, when people land there, right, to
Yep.
spend the night, whatnot. Millennium Monopoly, however, it's all renting. So
Oh,
it's a very funny concept, and it's very true to our generation. But as to highlight to John what you said, right? Like if you're able to get that initial investment, whether it's coming from you and your siblings or family, that group funds enough to start off your first property, and then it grows into multiple, right? That's at some point. I know that there's people that are friends with each other, which this situation can get messy because you're dealing with tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? They go into it, they flip it, they share the gains from it and things like that. um like, I think there's a lot of opportunities. It's just, what is your comfort, right?
yeah. So, I think there has been a lot of news on, Toronto or Ontario itself and the government. They're really, changing up that immigration policy. So, you know, is that kind of, another reason why this market, it's just super hot. You want to get in as early as possible. You're going to hear people say, hey, you can't go wrong buying real estate. What's your comfort level? Do you feel that, hey, if you did have this money right now, Dennis, are you going to invest your money in real estate, or would you have other investment vehicles that you're kind of keeping an eye on right now?
So to kind of touch base on the whole immigration bit, I understand that is a factor in what's driving our real estate so high. But the other story too is, some people may not know, is just that people are buying things that they can't afford, and banks are kind of hesitant to lend, which is then driving that kind of demand for property, right? So I think there's a lot of different things going around, but that influence the market. But ultimately, I do want to own. So with your question, John, if I had the initial investment, I think I still would go for property, because at the end of the day, if the quote unquote bubble does burst, right, I would still have a place to stay. You know what I mean? People will
Yeah.
always need a place to live, right? So renting, I may not, my margins may not be as high, right? But I know that for sure it's going to be still paying off my mortgage at least, and all those kind of different fees along it, right? And I'm still earning a little something back. Versus, like, yes, if you're investing into, a stock market and stuff like that, you can diversify your portfolio and minimize risk. But the volatility, that's it's still there, right? I can lose it all one day. If I don't think I would, but there is that really rare scenario that I can. Versus if I do lose it with, like, the value of this property tanks, well, guess what? Maybe I just go live in it for a little bit and have a mental break.
Yeah. Cry in your home with no furniture is better
Yeah.
than
Yep. Yep.
crying out in the cold with nothing in your stock portfolio account, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. No, that is a fair point. I think you touch on kind of the right spots on this topic. The reason I did bring up this topic is, you know, before you kind of jump into it, assess your own personal situation. But that's my mindset too. I'm not opposed to owning, because I think, having a, at least a minimum of one property, it's going to take someone 5 years, but it could take others 10,
Hmm.
15, 20. There's nothing to be ashamed about, but just eventually owning that one piece of property really makes sense for, anyone who's really looking to build their wealth. And, whether you're looking today to get into the stock market, whether you're looking to, make more money, I think real estate should be on your radar. And bringing up the topic about renting and owning really at the bottom line, you need to figure out what's the personal situation and kind of what works best with you. So, yeah,
Yeah, like again, rent. We want to highlight renting is not a bad option. It's just you know, it's a method to test different things on yourself, right? Whether you're testing your mental health or you're testing relationship commitments. A lot of people want to kind of move in together first, see how they act, and then that's the make or break, right, for the next step.
yeah. You know what? That's a interesting story. I think part of myself, if you kind of heard on other podcasts, and Dennis too, probably, we're kind of like number guys. So we both studied finance. So just me doing the calculation, like, whoa, I'm burning this much money per year annually, to rent a place. Yes, you get that freedom and luxury, but at the same time, you don't own any equity in this venture. So whatever money you are saving, you better be putting that in a proper investment vehicle to, whether it's to offset inflation or, just to make sure you have, you know, something in the piggy bank, right? So, yeah,
Exactly.
that very personal experience for sure. When I look at renting prices and kind of just the thought of, hey, should I rent a place, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
testing a relationship. That's a touchy one for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Exactly. Well, if if the relationship does work out, I think of it as double income, right? So it kind of lessens the burden on yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
exactly.
Aside from that, is there anything else that, you know, on this topic that we're covering, might be beneficial to, anyone who's listening to our podcast?
I just randomly thought of a interesting thing. Um, how do you feel about renting or owning mobile homes? Meaning, when I mean mobile homes, I don't mean just a trailer. I mean people that have refurnished their cars and whatnot to be a living space, or they're living on a boat. What do
Like
you
like a
feel about that?
like a van life? Van life?
Exactly,
Is that what you're trying to refer to?
yes, the van life. There are, so where we're from, not too far from us, another city in what we call the Greater Toronto area, Port Union. There's the water there. There's actually a lot of boats, and people do live there with functional electricity, cable, internet, and all that jazz, right? And
Yeah.
the positive instantly think about is like, if you don't like your neighbors, you just drive away, you boat away or whatever, right? But what are your thoughts on that? Because we're talking about renting and owning.
Yeah. Like, is it still popular? Because I know, like, a few years ago, this was kind of like, words on the street, like, that's the next thing, right? Like, van life. I heard that term 2020, but is it still a thing nowadays? Or is it, you
I
know?
think it still is because if I'm very honest with you, I think this is the same time 2020 was also the same time I kind of discovered it, but my YouTube algorithm has not slowed down since. So people people are still making videos and how they furnish and how they upgrade and how things are set up and whatnot. But I found it such a interesting point because like people are fabricating their cars to be like a single room apartment, right? It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like, do you think this is like a renting owning kind of topic or something in the middle?
I think, you know what, it's not a bad idea, but for sure it's not for everyone because, the boat might be a different situation, but when we kind of dive into that van situation, you don't actually have a toilet. You need to probably go to like local like Tim Hortons or McDonald's to use the washroom, or your local gym, Good Life, to shower. So I think in the long run, it might not be viable, especially, if you want to start a family. You can't, I don't think you can have a family if you are just living the van life. But, if you're young, you're, looking to save some money and hey, you know what? You have no choice. You do have to rent a place. I think this actually is a good alternative if, you can handle the lifestyle and, there's going to be some pros and cons to it, but, I see the pros as, that way you actually could maybe save up more money to eventually own, right? So I'm not opposed to it actually. I actually think it's a quite an interesting idea. I could see myself doing it short term, maybe for like a month, 2 months. That's kind of like a vacation thing. But I think just kind of how I am, I'm kind of like a little bit of a clean freak. I think it'll be a little bit just hard. It'll be a bit rough to get used to that lifestyle. And nothing against it, but I think it might not be for me. But how about you, Dennis?
I think so too. At the end of the day, I feel a little bit more secure being in a little bit more of a box that doesn't move. Right? I love my running waters and running toilets, and it's true, John. Like, a lot of them they do have this kind of toilet that doesn't smell or anything like that, but it's fairly small, and you eventually have to empty it, right? If not,
Yeah.
then you kind of go into the forest, right? And for our female listeners, that may not be the greatest at or convenience. There's those kind of factors, right? But ultimately, it's kind of enjoyable. You can go. I can live Toronto one day. I can go out to British Columbia another day, and my living situation, if I can comfortably call it home, then my home comes with me, right?
Yeah, but like you would have to be able to like quote unquote work from van, right? Like, I you know, it really depends on your job too,
Yeah.
if you are in that van life, you have that mobility. You can go from, Toronto one day, BC another day, but I hope whoever's doing it has some sort of means of income because, I think our topic today is about, what are the pros and cons between, renting versus owning. And, I think these are assumptions that, it's regular person. You probably should be making some income, right?
Right. I think you're right. I think maybe we should have set up another topic for this one, but it was just something that off the top of my mind I would just love to pick your brain with. Uh, but one last thing I just want to mention about this van life topic. Have you ever thought of how the mechanic would react when you bring it into a shop to like do maintenance? It's just like you're doing for an oil change, and after it's like they try to open things up or they see something inside. It's like, what the hell? Like there's a stove in here, a full bed. I would also assume it gets heavy for I guess the car jack or lift, whatever they do. If it raises up, it must be so
Yeah.
much more heavy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of funny.
That's true. Yeah, they might be kind of be like, they might be acting professional, but behind closed doors, like, what the heck is this? What kind of contraption is this guy bringing in?
Running
You know,
water and toilets and stuff.
uh, yeah. You know what? It's a good idea, but I think I think it's more short term than a long term solution.
Hmm.
But I think if you can do it yourself, do it. Yeah, actually, before we end this call, I think it's not popular here, but from what I heard, under like mobile homes where like they ship your home in like a container box and they just drop it somewhere and it opens up into a home. I think it's not common in Canada, but in the US, I think there are stuff like that. I don't know if you seen something or heard something like this before.
Yeah, I kind of slowly recall something like that. Is it made out of those kind of metal containers?
I think so. It might be those like
Cargo ones, right? Those cargo
cargo
containers.
container.
Yeah, I've seen those. It's interesting for the very least. It's have you have to insulate it and do all those kind of mechanical work to it. And I think it has running water then, right? Like it's going from like a
Yeah.
source. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I found the company. If you want to search up Boxable, Boxabl.
Mhm.
So apparently, I think this home is $50,000, which, when we kind of mentioned some prices,
Mhm.
50,000 isn't horrible if you compare it to the Canadian housing market.
It could be a down.
And
That's basically down payment.
yeah, down payment. But this is a 400 square foot
Wow,
prefabricated home.
nice.
Yeah.
So to our U.S. friends, lucky you.
Yeah. But if they bring this concept up to Canada, like would that solve a lot of issues, or would that be a nightmare for investors in the housing market? So, I think there's some opposing forces to it. I think, you know, the rich get richer. I think that's another topic to bring up another day, but it's strange how, we don't have these options here. Like, if you had to compare a van life or living in a metal box, I would go for the metal box, if that's available in Canada. But I don't think it's available here.
Um, well, we'll have to see what happens next, right? If it is,
Yeah.
then something to definitely worth listening to.
Yeah. So if there's nothing else today, let's cut the call, here. To our audience that are listening, check us out on our socials. We're playing on YouTube, SoundCloud. Find us on Twitter, Instagram at the Vending Plus. Also, use our hashtag the Vending Plus, and ask us anything. We want to hear your feedback. Or something that we said that caught your attention. Write it down, and we love to bring it up on one of our podcasts. Dennis, do you have anything to add?
No, but I'm good. Thanks so much for the call, John.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye for now.